In a quarry above Amman, a cutter runs a diamond blade along a block of cream limestone and chalks it for Amman, where a municipal rule requires the face of every new building in the capital to be clad in stone. Before 6 on a Tuesday, in a flat on Jabal al-Weibdeh, a woman climbs to her roof to knock a knuckle against a plastic tank. Because Tuesday is her street's water day, and the pump runs only a few hours. In a Karak kitchen, a grandmother turns a stone of dried milk in her palm. This is Jordan, a kingdom of 11 million people, most descended from someone who arrived, Circassian, Palestinian, Iraqi, Syrian, on hills where water comes by schedule and by tank. It grows winter tomatoes in the same valley where it evaporates a whole sea for salt, and it pours coffee for strangers while rationing bread for its own. A country that once broke open over the price of a loaf. What follows runs one line downhill, from the rooftop tank through the immigrant hills to the valley floor, to a desert town that remembers 1989, and finally to the plate set before a guest. Across the rooftops of Amman, the tanks are the first thing the morning light finds. From the air, the capital reads as a single material, pale limestone poured over hill after hill. And on nearly every roof stands the same shape, repeated to the horizon. A cylinder of plastic bolted above the stairwell. There are hundreds of thousands of them in a city of some 4 million people. And together, they answer a fact the skyline does not otherwise confess. Jordan is among the most water-scarce countries on Earth, holding fewer than 100 cubic meters of renewable fresh water per person each year, a fraction of the internationally recognized scarcity threshold. Most households here do not receive water when they turn the tap. They receive it once a week on a fixed day, and they keep it on the roof. The tanks are not decoration and not habit. They are the storage a city runs on when the pipes below them run for only a handful of hours in the week. When the day arrives, the water announces itself first as a sound, a knock, and then a cough in the pipe before the tap runs clear. In a kitchen, the pressure will not last, and everyone in the household knows the order of the work. A woman fills the kettle, then 2 cooking pots, then a row of plastic jerry cans lined along the wall, moving quickly while the flow is strong, because the week's tea and washing and cooking are budgeted against this single fill. On her street, the water comes on Tuesday, so Tuesday is the day the whole house fills, the day the tank on the roof is topped, and the day she listens, later, for the pump to fall silent, the sound that ends her water day and starts the count toward the next one. The schedule that governs her kitchen is set far from it. At Ras Al Ain, where the old springs of Amman still surface and the water authority gathers and moves the municipal supply, the city is served the only way it can be, by rotation. Valves are opened to one district and closed to another, neighborhood by neighborhood, because there has never been pressure enough to reach the whole capital at once. What feels, on a roof, like a private household chore, is in truth a public act of arithmetic. Water divided by population, divided by days, and the answer written back onto the calendar as a fixed weekday. The still surface of the reservoir gives no sign of the strain, and that is the point. In Jordan, scarcity is not loud. It is metered out and kept quiet. The rotation reaches every address, but it does not weigh the same on each. Above Vedat, in the older refugee quarters south of the center, the tanks stand closer together, squeezed between television antennas and laundry lines on roofs that were built for far fewer people than now live beneath them. The camp opened as a grid of tents in 1955 for Palestinian refugees driven from their homes by war. And the tents never came down. And the concrete that later replaced the canvas kept the same narrow lots. Here, tens of thousands share the same half-square kilometer, the same few hours of pressure, and tanks smaller than the households they must supply. The ritual is identical to the one on the quieter hills. The fixed day, the quick fill, the listening for the pump. And the burden is not. The rule falls on everyone. The weight of it does not. The tank on the roof tells a household when water arrives. The hill it sits on tells them where they came from.
A city built on hills gives every community a place to stand. And in Amman, the word for a hill, Jabal, is also the word for a neighborhood, because each rise in the land carries a name and a settlement story. On Jabal al-Weibdeh, one of the oldest of them, stone stairs climb between old villas and jacaranda, and the strata of the hill read like the strata of the country, each generation's house set above the last. Modern Amman begins here. In 1878, when Circassians, Muslim families expelled from the Caucasus by the armies of a collapsing empire, resettled among the Roman ruins and laid the first streets around a theater already 17 centuries old. They came out of mountains and built on hills, and the capital that grew around them never lost the pattern. Someone arrives, someone is taken in, someone stays. A short way across the valley stands Jabal al-Hussein, a hillside of shopfronts and stairways threaded through dense housing, and its name sits above a harder arrival. The neighborhood grew around a Palestinian refugee camp opened in 1952, in the aftermath of the war that emptied the towns west of the river. And today, more than half of all Jordanians trace their roots to Palestine. The state that received them was young and made by design to receive. King Abdullah I bin al-Hussein, who founded the Emirate of Transjordan in 1921, built an administration that granted citizenship and took arrivals in rather than turning them back, so that a camp could become a quarter, and a quarter could become, in time, simply part of the city. Downhill from the named heights lies the most lived-in of these places. In Wedat, opened as rows of tents in 1955, the provisional hardened into the permanent, the canvas giving way to concrete, the lanes narrowing, the camp growing a market, a school, and a football club whose name is sung across the country on match days. The stalls sell everything a household needs within a few narrow streets. Hand-painted signs above them. A ball pinned under a boy's arm against a wall. Nothing here was meant to last, and all of it has. A temporary answer to a permanent loss became a home with an address, a postal route, and a team to lose sleep over. The oldest arrivals kept more than their streets. At the Circassian Charity Association, founded to hold a scattered people together, children still learn the measured steps of a dance carried out of the Caucasus, the boys in tall hats and long coats, the older members watching from the edge of the floor to see the homeland kept alive in a body of movement. Nearby, in a al-Weibdeh flat, a Circassian woman lays a length of embroidered cloth across the table and pours a second glass of tea. And the photographs on her wall, grandparents, a village, a mountain, are older than the country outside her window. The language spoken over the tea has survived almost a century and a half from home. The second glass is poured because a single glass alone would send a guest away too soon. The hills went on receiving after the founders were long settled. Iraqis came after the American invasion of 2003, opening bakeries and clinics across the eastern districts. Syrians came after civil war broke out in 2011, more than 1 million of them into a country of 11, until a small kingdom carried one of the highest shares of refugees anywhere on earth. Each wave settled where the last had left room, and the map of Amman became a record of other people's collapses, read hill by hill. A name, a year, a war, and a street that stayed. These hills learned to hold arrivals. Below them, the land runs only one way, down past the last houses toward the lowest place on the surface of the earth, where the country learned to feed the people it took in.
The land keeps falling. West of the capital, the road drops off the plateau through bare hills, the air thickening and warming as it goes, until sea level slides past unremarked and the ground keeps sinking beneath it, down to the floor of the Gore, the rift the Jordan River cut between the highlands, 400 meters below the ocean and the lowest dry land anywhere on Earth. Nothing about it should be green. Yet along its eastern edge runs a straight seam of water, the country built to override its own geography. The King Abdullah Canal, begun in 1961 and extended over the decades to some 110 kilometers, drawing off the Yarmouk and the winter floods of the side valleys and carrying them south down the trough by gravity alone. In January, while Amman keeps its coat on and waits for its water day, the valley below sea level lies warm, and it grows. What the canal feeds is a corridor of plastic. Low greenhouses run in ranks the length of the valley floor, their sheeting greyed by dust, and inside them the trapped heat is held over long rows of tomato and cucumber and pepper staked to overhead strings. A grower works down one row in shirt sleeves, tying a climbing vine higher to its line, pinching the side shoots out between finger and thumb, while the winter sun stands weak over the ridge behind him, and the fruit ripens anyway, weeks ahead of anything grown on the plateau above. This thin, warm strip is the country's kitchen garden, putting tomatoes on tables across Jordan through the cold months and loading trucks bound north for the Gulf. The water that fell by schedule onto a roof in Amman arrives here as something to eat. By mid-morning, the crates are moving. At the vegetable market in Deir Allah, a farming town raised on a mound that has been settled for more than 3,000 years, the night's picking is stacked in the open. Boxes of tomato and aubergine and leaf, graded and weighed and called out by price, then loaded again for the climb up to the cities. The valley that a household in Amman never sees is the valley that fills its bowl. But the gore does not only grow. Follow the river and the canal to their end, and the water arrives at a sea with no way out. The Dead Sea lies at the very bottom of the rift, its surface more than 420 meters below the ocean, and dropping close to a meter every year, because the rivers that once fed it are drawn off upstream before they reach it. Nothing lives in water this salt. Along the shallow southern basin, the country has laid out a grid of ponds and left the desert sun to do the work, evaporating the water off on purpose to leave the minerals standing on the bed. Those minerals are the whole point. At the works of the Arab Potash Company, established in 1956, and among the largest producers of its kind in the world, the crust the ponds leave behind is dredged and refined into potash, the potassium fertilizer shipped out to grow crops on other continents. The same valley that raises a single winter tomato by hand boils an entire sea away by the square kilometer. Water turned into food at one end of the rift and into salt and money at the other. The Ghor spends water with equal patience
whichever way it goes. What it cannot do is make more of it. Every litre grown in the greenhouses and every litre lost to the ponds is drawn from rivers that are shrinking and from ground that does not refill. And a country living this close to its own limit has learned more than once what happens when the accounting fails. The place where it learned that lesson hardest lies inland and uphill, on a dry southern plateau that has never forgotten what a loaf of bread once cost.
The water gives out here, and what its absence does shapes everything that follows. Back up out of the rift and away to the south, across a rising plateau of stone and thorn, the road climbs to around 1,100 meters and comes to Amman, a dry town of low houses and wide, dust-blown streets that sees few travelers and keeps a long memory. Nothing in the look of it explains why the modern history of the kingdom turns on this corner of the map. But in the spring of 1989, it did. That April, the government, unable to service the debt it had run up, agreed with the International Monetary Fund to lift the subsidies that held down the price of fuel and staples, and the cost of living jumped overnight. The anger broke first in Amman and ran south through Karak and Tafila and on toward the capital. Days of rioting, in which several people were killed and the army was sent into the streets. King Hussein bin Talal, who had held the throne since 1953, cut short a visit abroad and came home to dismiss his prime minister and do the thing no protest had ever forced from him. He reopened the parliament that had sat suspended for 2 decades and called the first full general elections since 1967. A rise in the price of bread had done what no party and no army had managed. It made the throne open the room. Neither the street nor the palace forgot the lesson. In the years since, cabinets have risen and fallen over the same arithmetic. Subsidies loosened in a good year and tightened in a hard one. Crowds gathering again in 1996 and after, each time the price of bread or fuel is touched. A country that cannot feed or water itself from its own ground lives permanently on the edge of that sum, and it knows to the coin where the edge lies. Which is why bread, of everything, is guarded like a border. Khubz, the flat, round loaf, is still sold far below what it costs to make, the gap paid by the state to keep it within reach of every house. At a public bakery in Amman, the ovens run from before dawn, the dough slapped flat and fed through in a moving line, the warm rounds coming off in stacks that a man bags by the dozen for a handful of coins, passing them out to a queue of laborers and grandmothers and children, sent down with a note and the exact change.
It is the cheapest thing in the shop, and the one thing the country has decided it cannot afford to let go. The same logic runs beneath the ground. When the rivers and the weekly rotation were no longer enough, the country reached for water it can never put back, drilling into the DC aquifer in the far south near Amman, a body of fresh water sealed under the desert for tens of thousands of years. And since 2013, pumping it 325 kilometers uphill to Amman through a single steel line. It buys time rather than more water, for the aquifer does not refill. It is a fossil being drawn down to keep the taps running a while longer. The kingdom rations bread by its price and water by the day, and both are borrowed against a future it can already see. But a loaf is not only a subsidy to be defended. Warm from the oven, it is also the first thing laid down beneath a shared meal. The base the rest of the food is built upon. To see what a house here does with bread when it means to honor someone, the road turns south once more, to a hill town under a Crusader castle, where the oldest answer to scarcity is stacked in the open market as pale stones of dried milk.
South of the capital, where the plateau folds toward the desert, the town of Carrick stands on a hill beneath a Crusader castle finished in 1142. And in its market, the oldest answer to scarcity is stacked in the open air. On one stall sit pale stones the size of a fist, hard as chalk and lighter in color than the limestone of Amman. Not stone at all, but milk. In a country where the tap runs by schedule and a single dry summer can burn a pasture down to dust, herders learned long ago to hold the good months against the bad by boiling ewes' and goats' milk down with salt, straining it through cloth, and drying it in the sun for days until it set hard enough to keep for years without a refrigerator. Milk turned into something that can outlast a drought, a whole season of grass carried in the palm of one hand. To bring it back to milk takes time and hands. In a Carrick kitchen, a grandmother turns one of the stones over in her palm, taps it once, and sets it to soak overnight. By morning, she works it in water with her fingers until the years dissolve and the thin, white liquid returns, sharp and sour, the taste of a pasture that no longer stands. She reduces it slowly over a low flame, stirring always in one direction so it will not curdle and split, while a shoulder of lamb softens in a second pot and rounds of thin flatbread wait to line the base of a wide metal tray. The kitchen fills with the smell of it, sour milk and simmering fat, a smell that means, to everyone raised here, that something is being celebrated or someone is being mourned. Nothing about the dish is quick. It is built across a single day, the way the milk itself was built across a season. What the grandmother is making is mansaf, and it is not weekday food. It is the dish set down for a wedding and for a funeral.
for a reconciliation between two families, and, above all, for a guest. The lamb laid over rice, over bread, the hot dissolved milk ladled across the whole tray until it soaks down through every layer. The platter is carried to the middle of the room and set on the floor, and the men first, and then the household, gather in a ring around the single vessel, each eating from the stretch of it directly before him, the right hand pressing rice and meat into a ball. To offer it is to spend the best of what a house has kept back for months. In a land that rations water and once rationed bread, the welcome poured over a guest is the one thing measured out without a schedule, and the stranger, by long custom, is handed the portion nearest the meat. The custom does not stay in Carrick. South and east, in the sandstone canyons of Petra and out across the desert, the Bedouins still cross. The same law holds, that a traveler who arrives with nothing is fed first and asked his business afterward. Because in country this dry, a closed door was once a death sentence, and the memory of that has outlived the danger. The milk that keeps for years and the door that opens for a stranger are two answers to a single problem, worked out on the same thirsty ground. Water falls by schedule over Amman, runs downhill through the immigrant hills to the valley floor, is grown and evaporated and rationed away. And here, at the far end of its road, it climbs back onto the table, dissolved out of a white stone and poured steaming over a tray set in front of someone from away. The grandmother wipes her hands on the cloth, lifts the heavy tray from the floor, and carries the drought she outlasted to the door. It is Tuesday again on Jabal al-Weibdeh. The woman climbs to her roof before 6, knocks a knuckle against the tank, and hears the hollow note that means it is nearly empty. Down in the kitchen, the kettle waits, and the jerrycans stand in their row along the wall. And somewhere below the street, the pipe begins to knock. "40 kilometers west, the greenhouses of the Gore are cutting the last of the winter tomatoes. On the southern plateau, the bakeries open below cost. In a Karak kitchen, a stone of dried milk sits soaking overnight. The pump runs, and the tank begins to fill. Here the day begins and ends with the sound of water arriving. The story continues in Nationscape's documentary on Oman.